Yeah, so we're all good to start. Let's welcome Brother Tenzin to another Wednesday Wisdom Series Metta Center talk. Brother Tenzin is one of our beloved speakers. He has done a few events with us. And without further ado, we would like to invite Brother Tenzin to give a short meditation followed by a talk. And at the end, we can have our Q&A. Off to you, Brother Tenzin.
Thanks so much, Bharat. Thank you, Eugene, and Sinsin also for organizing for the invitation. Let's take up that offer of some time for meditation before I begin to share on our topic for tonight. Perhaps some other friends are still arriving. Is my sound okay? You can hear all right?
All good, Brother Tenzin.
Very good. So I invite you to find yourself a comfortable sitting position. If you're in a chair, this might mean coming a little forwards in the chair, giving yourself a little bit more encouragement not to use the backrest, but to use the body's natural capacity for holding itself stable and upright. We can take a moment perhaps just to come into contact with the space surrounding us, the context in which we sit, perhaps aware of sounds in the space outside, distant sounds. Perhaps becoming aware of sounds close by. Perhaps becoming aware of sensations related to the body, the weight of the body on the surface on which we are seated. Perhaps warmth or coolness of air on skin or clothing. Perhaps becoming aware of sensations related to the breath, contact at the touching place on the nostrils and upper lip, of coolness of in-breath perhaps. Aware of that gift of life giving oxygen as the belly expands, the diaphragm descends. Perhaps allowing the sensations of that breath seeping into every tissue and cell to become clear. And as you breathe out, perhaps aware of warmth of the out-breath, giving back to the atmosphere, to living beings with whom we share this precious planet. Relaxing the body as you do so, settling into your sitting posture, feeling that sense of grounding and support from the earth beneath you. Nowhere to go and nothing to do, but enjoy in-breath and out-breath just as we find it. Breathing in, aware of in-breath. Tracking sensations of the in-breath throughout its whole duration, beginning, middle, and end. Allowing the breath to be just as we find it. No need to change it in any way. Breathing out, aware of out-breath, just as we find it. Tracking closely sensations of the out-breath throughout its whole duration. Beginning, middle, and end. Relaxing the whole body. Releasing tensions, allowing them to melt away. Letting go of distractions as they arise and pass. Perhaps in the form of thoughts of the past or future. Leftover feeling tones from experiences in your day, perhaps. Acknowledging, observing these as they arise and pass. Setting them aside for now, preferencing sensations of the breath. Allowing them to come into the foreground of our experience. To become clear and vivid. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath. Tracking sensations throughout the whole duration of the in-breath. Familiarizing ourselves with that place in the body where we find those sensations to be clear, distinct. Perhaps initially with the rise and fall of the belly, gross movements of breath. Perhaps finding eventually contact at the touching place in the nostrils and upper lip, or even the subtle breath in the whole body. Cultivating continuity of attention there. Tracking sensations as we breathe out. Out breath just as we find it. Wherever sensation is clear, distinct. Maintaining continuity of awareness throughout its whole duration, beginning, middle, and end. Relaxing the whole body. Setting aside distractions in the form of thoughts in the mind or feelings, sensations in the body other than those associated with the breath, our chosen object. Breathing in, aware of in-breath. Attending to sensations of the breath just as we find them. Continuity throughout the whole duration of in-breath, beginning, middle, end. Maintaining that attention even during the natural pause between in-breath and out-breath, just as it is. No need to change it in any way. Even as sensation subsides into subtlety, maintaining that curiosity. Breathing out, aware of the out-breath. Continuity of attention, beginning, middle, end. Preferencing sensations of the breath even during the natural pause between out-breath and in-breath, without need to change it in any way, long or short. Relaxing in that awareness, allowing it to fulfill the mind. Releasing tensions in the body. Letting go of distractions as they arise and pass, arise and pass, arise and pass. Wonderful. Thank you, dear friends, for your energy of practice. You might like to generate some warmth in the palms of the hands and give yourself a gentle massage. Face and head, perhaps. Back of the neck, the shoulders. Just a small somatic reward for the body for having patiently supported us as we engage in this cultivation. And as we are transitioning from that more introspective awareness to a more kind of everyday outward focus, perhaps taking a moment just to note what were the dominant themes of our short practice just now. Perhaps aware of sensations in the body that you found pleasant or unpleasant, distracting or engaging. Perhaps aware of a theme in thought that was distracting or helpful for your practice. Perhaps some memory, a past experience, or something related to future, some planning that was intruding itself into your meditation practice, just by way of learning from every experience, recognizing that the only bad meditation is the one that we didn't do, as we say. And as we're training ourselves, for example, to throw a ball, we don't just turn away having launched the ball. We watch where it lands. The same in meditation. Very helpful just to review, even if it's a brief session like that, just to review and learn in that way. So perhaps towards the end of our session, we might have an opportunity to share a little about our experience in meditation, or indeed our experience in regards to the theme, the topic on which I'll be sharing this evening, the practice of living with impermanence, and how, in particular, these reflections on the 5 remembrances can be helpful. First of all, thank you once again for the invitation to join you. The Metta Center is a favorite sangha of mine. I've always enjoyed being able to connect, and I'm just regretful not being able to connect in person this time. That was the plan, but impermanence being what it is, uncertainty being what it is, all the causes and conditions did not fall into place this time. So here we are joining, many of us in fact, joining through Zoom. Maybe just an invitation there, if you can, please do feel free to turn on your video. I've got you in gallery view, and it's really nice to be able to see your faces. Of course, you may not all be in a situation where you can do that, but if you can, that would be much appreciated. And a big hello to those joining from the in-person session as well. So I don't have the pleasure of having met you all before, but just briefly, yes, my name is Brother Tenzin, or Venerable Tenzin. My ordination name, as you may gather, is actually a Tibetan ordination name, Ngawang Tenzin, technically. But the robes that I'm wearing are more similar to those that we find in the Chan tradition, Zen tradition. And indeed, that's the tradition in which I've been fortunate enough to receive most of my training as a monastic, though my ordination is indeed in the Tibetan tradition. And I've been inspired by many of my teachers to look for similarity rather than difference between traditions, to find what is complementary in different traditions, different perspectives, not only the Tibetan, the Vajrayana, but also the Chan tradition, Zen tradition, particularly Vietnamese Zen tradition, that of Venerable Zen Master, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, but also in particular inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh to maintain contact and interest in the teachings from the early Buddhist canon, the Pali tradition. So while the Tibetan, the Sanskrit tradition is very rich, has a lot of texts and commentaries, practices, reflections to offer us, the Pali tradition is also one that provides a wonderful window into the original teachings of the Buddha, we think. So much of what I'll be sharing this evening relates to that. But I hope we will have a little bit of time, and I will remember also to touch back into how this relates to especially the Yogacara, or like a non-dual understanding of the practice which we encounter in the Mahayana tradition. So Yeah, that was a little of my background. In addition to that, I guess you can say that my first meditation teacher was really the rainforest. Actually, I started a career as an ecologist and studied biodiversity and especially the impact of climate change for many years. And actually, while I was surrounded by many very passionate and knowledgeable colleagues, I really started to be drawn, first of all, just to the silence, the beauty of spending time in nature, in silence, especially to be immersed in the comings and goings of the other than human, the small creatures, the large trees, the movement of the breeze, the clouds, but also the change of the seasons, to really be not just an occasional visitor, but really immersed and embedded in the forest. And I started to realize actually that there was something else going on that was as interesting as the movements of especially the birds, which I was studying at the time. And that was actually what I brought in terms of my own mind, my own thinking into that natural space. And so I became steadily more interested also in the underlying psychology, the causes, if you like, for the choices that we make as human beings and how that has impact on the world around us. In particular, climate change, it seemed like we had a lot of information to hand, but as the years went on, I saw repeatedly how, as a community, as a society, in terms of politics and economics, we continue to make the same bad choices, we can say, about consumption, continue to have a really terrible impact on the very precious, very rare, in some cases, communities of plants and animals that I was studying in the rainforest in far north Queensland at the time. But not just there, also in our own towns and cities, of course. We are all living with the uncertainty now of the effect that our consumption, our patterns of consumption have had on the planet. So this interest that I have is one that I am increasingly aware that I share with many, that actually in Dharma sharing circles, in retreats, in popular discourse, there's a lot of discussion about impermanence and uncertainty. We're now living in a time when, unlike previous generations where spring felt like spring and summer felt like summer, autumn was a time of cooling and gradual transition to winter if you lived in a place that had 4 seasons. Whereas now in the place where I live, we can have -7 frosts followed by a heat wave in the middle of winter. And I'm sure many of you living in the bigger cities, I know Sydney, for example, where my home monastery is in Bilpin, there in the Blue Mountains. We see that everywhere, and it's part of the conversation that we have in the street. You know, wow, the weather is really strange at the moment. This is a common topic of discussion. I think you would have to be very, very diligent in your practice of the renunciate, or living in an isolated hermitage, not to be aware that we live in uncertain times. So this is a question that's on our lips. But I don't think it's a question that is new. I am also very aware that when we look even into the earliest teachings of the Buddha, this challenges of living with impermanence and uncertainty is one that the sages were aware of, that people throughout all times have been living with. And this is also because it's not just a modern climate change related uncertainty that we're talking about, of course not. We're also talking about just that kind of everyday uncertainty of relationships. They are beautiful one day, challenging the next. Possessions fade, break, run out of batteries, whatever. It befalls material things is something that we are acutely aware of. We can see it in our politics, in our culture, the drastic changes that happen now seemingly very, very quickly as a result of the speed of the flow of information in social media, for example. So these are not only kind of global questions, they are also very, very personal questions. They are about our own lives, about our own relationships, our jobs, our livelihoods, our beloved ones. So this question of how to live with uncertainty is a very interesting one. It's a very human question. And reflecting on this recently, when I was asked a question about how to live with impermanence, I actually had the sense that in some very important way, I think the heart of the question here is actually how to live with certainty, not with uncertainty. Because actually the situation in which we find ourselves is one not of so much uncertainty, but actually a sort of certainty which we find very uncomfortable, in fact. And this sort of certainty is actually the topic, in an important way, the topic of the sutra that I will share a little bit on this evening. For those interested to follow it up, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya 5.57, subjects for regular reviewing. This is where we find the 5 remembrances. And by practicing with certainty, what I'm referring to is the certainty that we have in this body that we will grow old. This is the first of the 5 remembrances, in fact. We are not exempt from aging. It is also the certainty that having this body, I will also be subject to illness, to sickness. I am not exempt. I have not transcended sickness, even with all of our modern medicines and technology. This is a certainty that we face. Having this body, I am also liable to passing away. This body will eventually die. This is the fate that awaits us all. This is certain. And not only that, but being in the world, I also must be parted from all those that I hold dear, my beloved ones, also my possessions. And lastly, that my true possessions, as Thich Nhat Hanh translates it, are actually my actions of body, speech, and mind. So these 5 remembrances, straight away for me, a very, very different way to frame this question of living with uncertainty. Actually, it seems that much of our energy, our efforts in daily life, in our relationships, careers, is directed towards distracting ourselves from these certainties, actually. That my only guarantees are really the impermanence of these things that I hold dear, even up to and including this body. And we distract ourselves in so many different ways, in consumption of food, of possessions, of conversations, of social media, popular culture. When we look into what it is that is directing that energy, what is the impulse that lies beneath that thirst for distraction, I think often it's possible for us to come into contact with actually the dissatisfaction that we feel around these things that we cherish above all others, this very body and our beloved ones, being fundamentally impermanent and unreliable as a source of lasting happiness. And in fact, this is why perhaps this theme of the inevitability of aging, of sickness, of death, of being separated from those that we hold dear, is a theme that we find right through the Pali Canon, and indeed on into the Sanskrit tradition. It's a practice in the Mahayana traditions also to revisit regularly these reflections. And it's not also just a practice for monastics by any means. Actually, these reflections find themselves also among the 10 regular reflections that a monastic should engage with. And if we have time, we can visit a little of those. But very importantly, in the sutra that I'm referring to, the instructions are directed towards a woman or a man, a lay person, or a renunciate, a monastic. These are practices for everyone. Why are they practices not just for a renunciate? Because we can see that, well, in some ways they're a little bit confronting. This a regular reflection on being parted from those that we love is not something that we find very compatible with the encouragement that we get through popular culture to, find a life partner and settle down and develop strong and healthy relationships with friends, family, all of the above. It seems like something that's maybe more suited to a renunciate, someone who's gone forth into the life of an ascetic, or something that only really is compatible with a hermit lifestyle. I think it's very important at this point to recognize that it's not being parted from our love here. It's not to say that we should not love deeply, but just to recognize that even with that love, the strongest love in the world cannot prevent the eventual parting of ways, even if we are able to navigate all of the ups and downs of relationship. Why is this impermanent still? Because of this body being subject to aging, subject to sickness, and subject to eventual passing away. So I think it's possible for us to reframe this challenge that we have in living with uncertainty in the world, in our daily life, but also in terms of climate change, for example, to shift that, to really look at what are the underlying causes that drive us towards distraction, towards our trying to find a salve, maybe we can say, for actually what are really quite unavoidable certainties. And there really is a very beautiful invitation there to perhaps re-examine some of those distractions, some of that consumption that we engage with, and start to look instead at what is really important to us. What actually are the really important things to us? If our deeds, karma, is our only inheritance, and there's a beautiful phrase in the sutra here, Kamma sakomi, kamma dayado, kamma yoni, kamma bandhu, kamma patisarano. I am the owner of my deeds and the heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb, kamma yoni, my relatives and my refuge. I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. And maybe it's worthwhile mentioning here that I don't feel that it is necessary for us to subscribe to a classical understanding of the workings of kamma or karma in Sanskrit in order to recognize the importance of the principle of cause and effect in how we experience our lives. It's also worthwhile pointing out that there is an individual and a collective component to karma in this sense, that we are the inheritors of our own deeds. We can see this very clearly in our daily lives. Who suffers most when we act in anger harshly? It's often not the person who is the object of our anger or frustration. It's actually our very selves. This is why it's said that anger is like a poison coursing through our veins, actually, because we suffer as a result. We can say that in an important way, our life is like the echo in the mountains. Actually, it's the bouncing back to us of our actions of body, of speech, and of mind. So there is this individual aspect which is alive here and now. It's not something that only we can experience in the next life after this body passes away. It's something we can experience right here and right now. There is also this collective aspect, and we only need to look to some of the scenes being played out in the world today in different places about how actions of the collective influence the experience that individuals have in those places. There are places of deep suffering in the world at the moment, with causes and conditions that date back many, many generations, somehow very, very deeply tangled knots, we can say, of cause and effect, action and reaction, which those communities, and indeed all of us, the whole human community, are currently inheriting the results of. So if we recognize this, I feel like there is a treasure in this practice to bring us back to what is actually really important to us. What are the really important things to cultivate? It's clearly not attachment to this body. In the sutra, it talks about the intoxication with youth, intoxication with health, intoxication with possessions that causes us to actually engage in unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind, thinking that we will always have our health, always have our youth, always have our possessions. We behave in a way that doesn't really place appropriate value on what is really important. And I return again to this separation from our beloved ones. Again, this is not separation from the love itself. And this is why I feel very strongly that actually, as you would be well aware, it's right there in the name, the Metta Center, the importance of the practice of loving kindness. Actually, we need not abandon the practice of love and care for others just because we will be parted from them. Actually, the contrary, it's more important for us to practice loving kindness and care for our dear ones, knowing that this is a fleeting opportunity that we have to be close to our dear ones, close to those that we cherish. It's possible, I think it's safe to say, that one of the most beautiful experiences we can have as a human being is being face to face with the one that we love. The joy that can arise in that situation is one that we should not waste in distraction. We should take hold of that opportunity to really set aside, I feel, to set aside our differences of opinion perhaps, and really be present for our loved ones, because we don't know how long we have to spend with them. I recently returned from a trip to Kathmandu. Each year I am lucky enough to be able to travel to Nepal and join a course there of study, and also offer some meditation, facilitation of basic practices. And a wonderful coming together of the Sangha in a really a beautiful and very rich environment for study of the Dharma in Kathmandu. And just a few days after I left, I saw in the news that terrible rains had come just right on the end of the wet season there. Several hundred people actually lost their lives. And I had only been there just a few days before. I was really struck by how quickly things can change. And for me, coming back here to Australia, we have a project here in the Dorrigo Plateau to create space for meditation retreat. And one of the reasons why we chose this area is indeed actually because this has been a refuge for biodiversity in the face of climate change for approximately, we think, 120 million years. There has been rainforest in this place for that long. It's a World Heritage listed area with very high biodiversity and so on. But recognizing this, we also realized that this is an important refuge for human beings as well, as the climate changes and warms up. Places that have secure supplies of water, protection from extremes of heat and dryness and so on, will become very, very important. So I'm really kind of encouraged. It revitalizes my aspiration to be part of building community that focuses on the things that really matter, like the practice of loving kindness, just as you do there in the Metta Center community, rather than whitewashing, in a way, covering over my concerns for the future of these landscapes here, these beautiful rainforest communities, or my attachment to possessions or even this body through heedless consumption. And that doesn't necessarily mean giving up all worldly supports that we have access to, but it can mean perhaps just taking time each day to come back to what is really important for us. And for each of us, that might be different. It might be as simple as spending time with loved ones. It might be a question related to our career, our job. Are we being fulfilled in that job? Are we able to really manifest our deep aspiration in the world through that work? Do we have a sense that we are spending our time wisely? One of the reflections for the monastics, daily reflections, also in the Anguttara Nikaya, 10.48, for those who are interested. We also find reference to the inevitability of being separated from those that we hold dear in this sutra. And also this very important reminder to look at what is our true inheritance, our deeds, our actions of body, speech, and mind. But it also says, as the days and nights flit by, what sort of person am I becoming? What am I cultivating here? Are my actions of body, speech, and mind the result of my past conditioning? Seeds that I've inherited from my ancestors, my education? Am I reacting due to past conditioning to new experience? Or am I able to respond from a place of open-heartedness, of care, or at least of equanimity, of being capable of a balanced and embracing perspective of what is arising, perhaps within, perhaps in relationship, perhaps in interaction with others? When my spiritual companions question me on my deathbed, will I not be embarrassed? This is actually one of the questions that we are to ask ourselves regularly as a monastic. This is a very interesting question. I'm not sure how often I would have been asked to think about that had I not become a monk. I offer it into this space here in that spirit. It's for each of us to find whether this is an important question for us to ask, but it's a very interesting way to think about our lives, isn't it? It's not very often that I think we have the space, the invitation to take stock, to ask a different question. If we are getting our encouragement for the sorts of questions we should be asking from our social media feed, I mean, I'm not on social media very often, and I think that there is a beautiful possibility through communities like Metta Center to transform those channels of consumption. But very often it's an algorithm that's deciding what we see, and it's not always asking the important questions. It seems to often, to my untutored eye, it seems to be often asking us whether we ought to be upgrading our car or our house or our phone or some sort of material possession. Once again, to my thinking, based on reflecting on these 5 remembrances and this question of living with uncertainty, a lot of that encouragement is really to help us to paper over certainty. Actually, once again, going back to these 5 remembrances, we live with certainty. We live with the certainty of aging, certainty of illness, certainty of dying one day. We don't know when. Certainty that that which we hold dear and which we cherish, that we will be parted from it. And the certainty that the only thing we truly inherit, we can't take anything else with us, as it were, except our actions, body, speech, and mind, our karma, if you like, or even just simply our actions. Because each action in this understanding is also the cause for other effects to arise. And we can take action, as I mentioned, we can take action from a place of reactivity that is conditioned more or less by our past experience, past trauma it may be, past hurt, perceived wrongs that have been done to us, perceptions that we have about the motivations of others. This is what is meant by conditioning. But as human beings, we have a very wonderful opportunity, thanks to the plasticity of the mind, the possibility that we have for learning and changing the mind. We have a wonderful opportunity to also cultivate possibility to respond to those situations from a different place, one that is not conditioned by past experience, but conditioned by our aspiration and our cultivation to see to the heart of things, to see clearly what it is that is really important to us. When we are taking steps on this path of cultivation, we may have initially maybe an impression somehow that through the practice of meditation we will be able to be happy all the time, that we will reach a state of equanimity, of enlightened perspective, such that we're unperturbed by experiences, good and bad. We can just float through. There's even a word, a beautiful word in Sanskrit. They love big, long, compound words. Yet drista dharma sukha vihara. Dwelling happily in the present moment is one way we can translate this. We can also translate it as dwelling in contentment with regards to all phenomena, which is a wonderful image, and something maybe we can give rise to a picture. What would that look like? It kind of looks like the Buddha, sitting in peace and stillness with a gentle smile on his lips, in equanimity. But our reality is very different, yeah? But one thing that we can perhaps explore is, if I'm not able to be happy in this particular moment, can I be intimate with this experience? Can I embrace this experience, perhaps an experience of change, of impermanence, perhaps an experience of illness? Can I, in doing so, not waste an opportunity to grow? This question, what sort of person am I becoming as days and nights flit by? And in the understanding of this cultivation that we're exploring together, that the Buddha shared, the key here is through this cultivation of awareness, of mindfulness, of open-hearted connection with our experience. Shamatha vipassana, it's a word that some of you will be familiar with, calming and looking deeply, or tranquility and insight, many different ways to translate. Some perhaps are more familiar with the vipassana approach, this looking deeply. But in many ways, and especially in the Mahayana tradition, we do not separate these two because actually they go hand in hand, like two wings of a bird. It is the calmness that allows the mind to see clearly. This is what we practice in the first few minutes of our session, coming into contact with an object which is quite subtle relative to those other objects which we consume in daily life as we are distracting ourselves from perhaps discomfort that we experience, the flood of information. The breath, in contrast, is quite a subtle experience. By calming the mind, training the capacity to stay with the object of our choosing rather than bouncing around from object to object, distracting ourselves with whatever comes along, we give rise to a possibility to look deeply into our experience and really see into the heart of things, this heart of things being what is most important to us. And I think it's important. It's something that I'm practicing with in recent days, of approaching that shamatha aspect of changing the background rather than these clues that come to us from time to time. Indeed, related to these 5 remembrances are the spiritual messengers. Some of you may be familiar with this story from the Buddha's early life. Just as he was a young man learning about the world, he was very protected from worldly life by his family, who wanted him to stay in the family, in the lap of luxury, it seems from the stories that we have. But nonetheless, unavoidably, the Buddha came across someone who was growing old, someone who was experiencing illness. He saw a dead body. In India, it's not so hard to see because of the tradition of cremation. It's not so hard to meet such a spiritual messenger. And due to those experiences, he had this growing discomfort with continuing just to enjoy luxury and consumption, because actually at the heart of things here, there seemed to be another more important reflection. Actually, what is it that really matters here? And I think for each of us, we have had an experience. For some, it will be more penetrating than others, depending on your age, your life circumstances, those surrounding you. But each of us will, no doubt, I am very sure that each of us will have met one or other of these spiritual messengers already in our lives. But if we allow that background to continue, that background of consumption, the flood of information, it can sometimes be very hard to take hold of that message and make the most of it, because we so quickly distract ourselves from perhaps the sadness, the discomfort that arose as a result of that. If we, on the other hand, have a cultivation of shamatha, of calm, abiding meditation, of breath awareness perhaps, actually we are training our mind in a very different relationship to our experience, one that actually we are increasing the power of the mind to hold our experience as it is, to see it as it is arising, and to catch these moments, these precious moments of a message, of a truth that gets to the heart of things. So this is why we cultivate shamatha, and in many ways we can see also echoes of the vipassana knowledges, for those of you familiar with those, including anicca, dukkha, anatman. We can kind of summarize the vipassana knowledges in these terms: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and the non-self of our experience. Impermanence is very easy to discern in the 5 remembrances. This growing old, it's right there. Sickness, dying, being separated from that which we hold dear, that is the unsatisfactoriness of the experience. That which we thought would provide lasting satisfaction eventually crumbles, fades, rusts, breaks down, checks out, leaves a note on the fridge. And the non-self, perhaps we can see this coming in terms of our true inheritance being our deeds. I am not just this body. Myself, if I'm going to recognize one, extends far outwards in ripples with every action of my body, speech, and mind. I have impact in the world. And if I'm cultivating some calm, some equanimity, and especially an open heart, a benevolence, a friendliness towards not just other beings, but to my experience, and acceptance, then I create a space to stand in which I can respond rather than react, and change perhaps the nature of those ripples. And we don't need to look very far. If we dare to read the news lately, we can see what happens in the world when people come from a place of reactivity, of anger, of hurt, of pain. The ripples that they can send out into the world can be enormous. So we have a choice through the practice, and I feel that there's a precious support in that cultivation in remembrances like these 5 remembrances, which are indeed, as I mentioned, a daily practice for monastics, but are also wholeheartedly invited for everyone to reflect on from time to time, as reminders what it is that really matters. What is it that is really important here? Is it the latest thing coming through my news feed, or is it just being with those that I care about, being fully present for an experience? Maybe it's a difficult experience, but can I be intimate with that experience, fully present? Maybe in doing so, I can actually be a raft for another person. And I think it's easy to see the connection even to something as seemingly vast as the climate crisis that we face individually and collectively. It's very easy to see the connection in terms of our consumption, our patterns, choices that we make, how these ripples have affected not just our local community, but the whole planet. So it seems to me these are practices for our times, and a rich vein there to be explored in those moments when maybe it's feeling, like I don't really have time to meditate today. I'm kind of in a bit of a rush. There's a lot of things on my list and here. Maybe if we just spare a thought for these reflections, we don't need to go to the crematorium. We can just remember, wow, what am I doing with my time as these days flip by? What is it that really is important to me? What am I manifesting in the world? So it's been a delight to be able to share some of my thoughts and reflections on these practices. I've enjoyed diving in a little bit in my own time to find some of the parallels. I can share with some of our facilitators the details of the various sutras that I've referred to, and some practice resources for those who wish to follow up. But I'd really like to give us plenty of time for some questions I can't promise to have the answers, but often there's a lot of wisdom in the questions themselves. So I would really like to hear from you.
Thank you, Brother
And maybe
Tenzin.
I'll hand over to Bharat to kind of facilitate that in however way, whether it's raising hands or so on. So yeah, thank you so much for your attention and your aspiration. I am here because you are here. So thanks again, and please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Brother Tenzin. That was a very kind message that you shared about a rather dreadful situation. So I have a question, and let me kickstart the proceedings while our audience is taking in what you just said. And in fact, I've encouraged them to use the chat function here to put in the questions. And, if anybody has any questions and they want to use the voice mode, they can obviously raise their hands. There is a function on Zoom to actually raise your hand virtually, and that'll allow me to see that you have raised your hand to ask a question. If that works, that's great. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat. But before that, can I ask you a question, Brother Tenzin?
Please.
So you mentioned about samatha or vipassana coming together, shamatha vipassana coming together.
Mm.
And can you elaborate a bit more on the Mahayana tradition and how it actually sees it? Because what you covered mostly is from the Pali tradition in this talk. What would be the equivalent of a shamatha vipassana practice in the Mahayana tradition?
Mm. Thanks, Bharat. Yeah, this is an important question. It's a big one. This is like not another talk, a whole lifetime of study. But in a nutshell, we can say that it's quite common to separate to some degree in the Pali tradition shamatha vipassana, as you're aware, as you're referring to. For example, in Goenka Vipassana practice, you would maybe spend 3 days of a 10-day retreat, calming the
Right.
mind, bringing attention to the breath, and then move to contemplation of an evolving object. In the Pao tradition, that 3 days might become 3 years if your
Hmm.
teacher feels like you need to cultivate more, especially absorption, jhana, before moving into the Vipassana practice. In the Mahayana tradition, it's very common to come across, especially we find it in if some of you have visited a Tibetan center, you see on the wall a beautiful mural sometimes of a kind of a curving path, a monk doing his best to tame an elephant which is charging around. There's a monkey, there's a rabbit there as well. Yeah, these images refer to a related image we have in the Zen tradition, the chasing of the buffalo. We find that in the Japanese, Vietnamese, the Chinese tradition. These refer to the 9 stages of shamatha, and we find instructions for those, especially in the Yogacara Bhumishastra. In the Yogacara, the philosophical tradition that underpins Zen, Mahayana traditions in general, it's more common to combine the two. So actually, the intended fruit of that cultivation is to be able to rest in equanimity with all phenomena in our experience. This is a bodhisattva practice, so not one in which we are trying to penetrate into ultimate materiality and attain nirvana for oneself, but actually to stay in samsara, if you like. So very important to have a toolkit that allows us to be with all kinds of experience. And it's by combining shamatha vipassana together from the beginning, actually, that we are encouraged to cultivate. And really, I think we can see this no matter which tradition we practice in. We can see this happening even as I sit down and I'm dealing with the arising of gross hindrances, drowsiness, dullness, doubt, anger, desire. There is a discernment, a mind of discrimination arising there in the positive sense that's able to sort the wholesome from the unwholesome. So there is already active from the beginning a kind of a looking deeply in even shamatha practice based on the Pali tradition. But in the Mahayana tradition, we are combining, as it were, rather than emphasizing, for example, jhana, combining
Hmm.
from the beginning, not saying, oh, you will need at least fourth jhana before you can move into vipassana. It's kind of an integrated approach. not wanting to imply any kind of a value judgment. I think a healthy understanding of the Mahayana tradition is one in which we also value very highly cultivated shamatha, being able to,
Right.
absorb into a single object. Even cultivation like metta comes into beautiful fruit when we're able to absorb into, when there's no place in the mind for anything but love. This is a beautiful, the most beautiful state of mind we can enjoy as a human being.
Got it, Brother Tenzin. And in fact, there's a confluence of practices that is coming together in the Pali tradition. I'm broadly speaking about the Theravada tradition here. And I see more and more that people are translating samatha as more like collectedness rather than concentration within the modern setup. And I see a lot of other practices which emphasize not just absorption, but actually embodied presence of yeah, the body and mind coming together. So I think that there's a shift going on in the Pali tradition as well, and I think
Mm,
it's mainly due to keeping the commentaries aside from my point,
mm, mm,
because it's the commentaries that actually make the jhana or dhyana in Sanskrit as a one-pointed thing.
mm.
Anyways, moving on, Brother Tenzin. Simran has her hand raised, but before that, Eddie actually asked a question in the chat. He wants to know, how do we love but not feeling sad and losing when we really lose a dear one? And it's going to happen one day or the other.
Wow, thanks, Eddie. This is a beautiful question. Again, I mean, this is a lifetime practice, and we could devote talk after talk. But I think it's really important not to wait for loss before we practice. For example, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Actually, these cultivations where we can actually choose to give rise to such a powerful and precious emotion as love are really important for those moments when we are actually faced with loss. And we find through that practice that they are not separate, that actually already in loving kindness there is a cultivation of compassion, of joy, and of equanimity. The analogies, the um, images that we're invited to reflect on in Metta Bhavana of the mother with her only child begins with this kind of innate, spontaneous love and care that would arise between a mother and a helpless infant. But actually, in the cultivation of equanimity, the same scenario, we fast forward to that moment when the child is setting forth into the world. The mother has done what she can. It's not the moment to hold on. Actually, in order for the child to grow and flourish, she needs to recognize that she's done what she can. She's equipped the child with her wisdom. This person, this human being, fully formed, will now be the inheritor of their own karma. That their deeds will ripple out into the world and will bear fruit that comes back to them. And no one, not even the Buddha, can see exactly the intricacy of those waves and ripples, let alone change them. Buddhas do not save beings from their karma. So there's this sense of in true love, as Thich Nhat Hanh translates it, true love already having this aspect of equanimity, of being ready to let go. Actually, I cannot hold on. In order for my loved one to really thrive, to live, to be, I also need to give them space and allow them to go if need be. Of course, in the case of the the loss through death, of course, this is also a really important question. Perhaps we don't even really have time to get to the heart of it, but I mentioned that I would hope we would come around to possibility to talk a little bit about the non-dual perspective here. In complement to the five remembrances, we find, especially Thich Nhat Hanh has beautiful unpacking of this, actually right there in the Heart Sutra. No birth, no death, no increasing, no decreasing. How does this marry with our understanding of the five remembrances? Because in terms of the the ultimate truth. All that we see manifesting in the world, change and cause and effect, is the product of our own discriminating mind. It's our dualistic mind that creates the illusion of birth and death. Actually, there is only change. So this is it's a much broader, deeper contemplation, but for me, I believe the answer lies in that direction. When we're living with loss of a loved one, it's in this cultivation of loving kindness, of compassion, of joy also, but also equanimity, possibility to let go, and recognizing that we are the continuation of our ancestors, and that through their actions of body, speech, and mind, all beings live much beyond their physical body and its passing. So yeah, I will stop there, allow time for some other questions, but this is a very important, very beautiful question. It's a lifetime of practice is there as well, but perhaps that's at least some pointers, a direction to maybe take in reflection on that one.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Brother
Eddie.
Tenzin. That's indeed a very deep and rather important topic that we're not able to explore in full today, but probably in another talk in the future.
Mm.
But we can move on to Simran's question. Would you like to unmute and ask your question, Simran?
Sure, thanks, Bharat. Thank you, Brother Tenzin. My question is in regard to these five remembrances. What I feel like in you were saying about how we sort of use distractions to sort of like get away from these, but I feel like for me personally, like I distract myself and do whatever I do in life, but I feel like it's more so because I'm just afraid of like boredom. Well, not afraid, but I'm trying to get away from boredom. For example, like for me personally, I'm like physically I'm quite sick. Like I personally am in a situation I can't even leave my house. I can barely like move that much. So I'm like I've accepted sickness and death and that, but it's just the boredom. And I don't know, and I want to ask, where does that sort of aspect of life fit into these five remembrances?
Mm. This is a very interesting question, Simran. Thank you. I'm not sure I'll be able to do it justice. It seems like there's a lot there to reflect on. But I will say that in my experience, since I began cultivating mindfulness, I have not experienced boredom again. And I believe that one of the reasons for this is that the invitation to actually turn our attention to the nature of what is arising for us through the lens of the mind, rather than assuming our projected experience, our perceptions are a material truth, but actually directing our attention also to what is arising from my side, means that every experience, even the most dull experience, actually can have a flavor of awakening. Actually, there's an opportunity there for insight. There's no moment, at least while we're awake, when there's not the activity of consciousness. And understanding the nature of consciousness is the path that we are on in this cultivation. On the other hand, of course, we have unpleasant bodily experience. We have illness, we have sickness. These kind of experiences, I'm not even going to call them hindrances. These kind of experiences, like the actual the physical manifestation of this impermanence that is there in the five remembrances, these are unavoidable. What we are being invited to avoid, to dodge, is the second arrow, the self-inflicted arrow. But I think it's also important to remember that we're not in this alone. That actually it's really important for us to connect, to borrow the energy, the faith, the diligence, the interest, the insight of our fellows on the path. because there are moments when we just don't have the energy, when we're just feeling overwhelmed by our physical situation or something that's happening for us in our daily life. So these moments, I feel like, when we can really not just seek out, rely on, but actually we in some important way we borrow the energy from sangha, borrow the will to continue to dust ourselves off, to get back up and to carry on even when we've experienced difficulties. So I feel like that there's a lot there. It's not just distraction from unpleasantness that we are that's driving us to consumption, but I think that there is, even underneath boredom, as I mentioned, once we're really becoming quite interested in how our mind is behaving, how we are creating our internal experience, even situations when there's actually not very much going on can be very, very interesting. But we might need support in order to make the most of those, through being able to find the energy. Yeah, reach out, find a friend who's interested to have a talk about the practice, or make a time. There's lots of apps and so on that help us to make the most of those moments when otherwise maybe we would be experiencing boredom. But I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh has beautiful sharings about that. When we're practicing walking meditation, it's an opportunity to cultivate joy in the simple miracle of being alive, walking on this green earth with blue sky above. Very hard to be bored once we've brought that possibility to life, even just a little bit. Yeah, boredom is less likely to arise in my experience. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of a little bit off the cuff. Something there more to reflect on, I think, Simran. And my heart goes out to you. I'm sorry to hear that you're experiencing that difficulty in terms of the physical hindrances or obstacles to meditation. And I really hope and encourage you to continue to seek out support from Sangha and borrow that energy sometimes. Borrow that we can call it diligence, or that kind of encouragement to just keep practicing, and wish you all the best.
Thank you for the question, Simran, and thank you for that wonderful answer, Brother Tenzin. We have another question. I would have to give you the context to this. Nicola asks, from the Anguttara Nikaya 10.48, there is a question on empty huts. Do I love to live in empty huts? And she's asking whether that's a literal question or is a metaphorical question for reflection.
Oh, this is a great question. I love it when someone reads the sutta. As a monastic, I take this quite literally in some sense. I kind of read between the lines, though, a little bit. Am I contented with simplicity in terms of my living conditions? Because actually, right there in the beginning of Anapanasati Sutta, Rukkha mulagato shunyagara, go to the foot of a tree or to an empty room. So, am I able to not get bored? Once again, we find this. Am I able to not get bored in very simple conditions through the possibility of becoming very, very curious about what my mind is doing? This, to me, is a question for all practitioners, not just a monastic. But of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that in order to have an effective shamatha practice, we need to take all of our belongings to the tip. But it just might mean, can we simplify things a little bit? Can we create a space in our day when we're not checking the news feed at the same time as cooking a meal and talking to a friend and planning tomorrow? Am I able to just simplify things and really allow what's really happening to arise? I mean, if you're just sitting in an empty hut facing the wall, there's nowhere to hide. You can't just turn on the TV or anything like that. So each of us is going to find what does it mean, an empty heart in our lives, but some simplicity, some space around our experience. Again, like changing the background a little bit, turning down the volume on some of the inflows that we have, so we can start to discern what's really underlying, where is really our motivation coming from, what are the seeds that are arising here. Is there a seed of discomfort that's causing me to check my phone? Was I aware of a creeping in of some dissatisfaction before I looked for that distraction? Much easier in an empty hut, but it's not a prerequisite.
A good answer, Brother Tenzin. And I think we are kind of running out of time. So I'm going to ask one more question if anybody wants to. Otherwise, we can wrap up the session. One, two, three. I think that's a wrap up, Brother Tenzin. Thank you so much for that beautiful session. It was really great. I really enjoyed just being in your presence via Zoom, hearing you talk and chatting with you and being part of this beautiful community, Metta Center, and all the people around the world who join us for this Wednesday session. I'm not sure whether Sinsin has any announcement. He kind of is scratching his head, maybe trying to grab my attention, whatever. No, okay. He says no, he doesn't want to grab my attention. That's fine. But I do have an announcement, which is we are going to have
I
an
just felt itchy. That's why I was scratching. So
That's
it's very
great.
literal. Yeah. But I do actually want to say something now that because you actually remind me of this, I am going to say something.
Go
So,
ahead, please.
many of you probably know that Bante Sanata Vihari is coming to Sydney tomorrow, actually. So he's going to be staying here in Sydney for almost 4 months until the 9th of February to cover Bante Sujato's sessions on Friday nights and Wednesday nights. So, and he will also be running the Monday sessions regularly, almost weekly, from next week onwards until January. And in fact, the plan was to probably perhaps introduce Bante Sanata Vihari to Brother Tenzin tomorrow, but because Brother Tenzin was going to be here tonight, but then that's not happening.
Right.
And yeah, and also next weekend we have Ajahn Tanisaro's event. So everything is can be found on the Metta Center website. And I've also just shared the link of the place that Brother Tenzin mentioned briefly today, right, brother? And in Bellingen. So I believe Brother Tenzin is setting up a retreat center in a very beautiful area. We've actually talked a little bit about this before. I believe Simran mentioned this in passing as well. So hopefully one day we can visit you and then join the retreat there one day, hopefully.
Thanks so much, Sinsin. I will send a little bit more information, as I mentioned, including some of the references and so on. Thanks again, to all of you for being here, for coming together, giving me the opportunity to share a little bit. I hope there's been some things that are helpful. If there is, it's thanks to my teachers. If there's been something unhelpful or confusing, it's all my own fault, and I apologize for that. But yeah, just thanks to all of you for showing up, but especially Sinsin for your organization behind the scenes, tirelessly finding speakers. I know that we are sometimes very hard to pin down. I really regret not being able to be there in person this time, but I hope I can come good on that in coming months. Bharat, thank you for your facilitation, and thanks again to everyone.
Thank you so much, Brother Tenzin. Would you like to share the merits before we close the session?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumatitva Chiram Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumatitva Chiram Rakantu Lokasasanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumatitva Chiram Rakantu Mamparanti. May all beings benefit from the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy, safe, free from suffering, ourselves included. Take good care, everyone. May you be well.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Take care.
Take care, Brother
Take
Tenzin.
care.
Wish to
Thank
see you
you.
soon. Thank you so much.